you're probably looking at me on an internet browser. That internet browser is probably tracking you and trying to learn all sorts of things about you. Where are the other places that you've been on the internet? What are the things that you've bought? Who are your friends? Who are your associates? And in the very near future, this video itself might be watching you through your camera just as much as you are watching it. My name is Trevor Paglen, and I'm an artist. What I do is very broadly in the kind of landscape tradition, going out looking at landscapes. And when you're working in that tradition, you are looking at things that other artists have been looking at for hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of years. And so a big part of what I see the project of seeing landscapes is about learning how to see the differences between the landscape now and the way that other artists have seen it in the past. And in many ways, that's about trying to learn how to see the moment in history that you live in. Although I sometimes use tropes from documentary and use the kind of aesthetics of documentary, perhaps even, I'm actually trying to do something very different. I'm not trying to tell you something that's true. I'm not trying to make a true statement. What I'm trying to do is to activate your imagination. I'm trying to get you to ask questions about what it is that you think you're seeing and to put you in a position where perhaps what you think you know about the world is destabilized. After studying art, I went and actually studied geography, and I did a PhD in geography as a way to really learn how to see the world around us. And that's actually harder to do than it might sound, because the world is always changing, and because many of the things that shape the way that the world looks are quite frankly invisible, or that we don't notice, or that we haven't trained ourselves to recognize. When we think about the internet, we often use metaphors like cyberspace or the cloud or the information superhighway. We use these very abstract kinds of metaphors, but the internet is a very physical thing. And so one of the things I've been trying to do is learn how to see that. What do the buildings look like? What do the cables look like? What do the satellites in the sky look like? What's the infrastructure of it? And if you look at the internet for a while, you realize that 90-something% and the high 90% of information goes through cables that are underwater. And I wanted to see what those look like. Well, you can't. They're underwater. When they're coming on ground, they're buried. And so I learned how to scuba dive and thought, okay, if I learn how to scuba dive and I learn something about bathymetry, like what the structure of the ocean floor looks like, you should be able to find places where a cable would have to come over a reef or would be exposed on the ocean floor. And that's been a fun project over the years, is being able to travel around the world, dive under the oceans, and literally see the internet lying there on the floor of the ocean with little fish swimming around sometimes. One of the projects I've done for many years is looking at the sky. And I have a project where I try to track and photograph all of the secret objects that are in orbit around the Earth. The military or the intelligence community, they can have all the secret satellites that they want. They can't have their own secret laws of physics. And oftentimes you can tell what a particular satellite is doing in the sky based on the kind of orbit that it's in. So if it's in a polar orbit, it's probably taking pictures. If it's in a geostationary orbit, it's probably either relaying data or it's eavesdropping on other people who are relaying data. It doesn't look like much in many cases. It's very abstract. You'll have a little streak interrupting a field of stars, or you'll have a few little dots interrupting stars that are created by the movement of the Earth. They're very small, very subtle, and very abstract kinds of images. But for me, they've taught me to see the night sky in a completely different way. I think that we make sense of the world just as much through images as we do through language. Images help us imagine things, help us orient things, help us articulate things, help us think about things. As a lot of the reporting on the Snowden archive started coming out, I noticed that over and over again, newspaper stories about the NSA were being illustrated with one particular image that was in the public domain. And I spent some time looking at that image and realized that it was taken probably in the early 1970s. I thought, at least we need a new picture of this headquarters building. So to NSA's great credit, they gave me permission to overfly their headquarters in a helicopter at night, and I produced a number of images of that headquarters building. For me, the goal of that project was really to just get new images, new metaphors, new ways of seeing potentially into circulation. I'm obviously somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about images and image making and the meaning of images. And one of the things that I've seen over the last few years that I think is maybe one of the most revolutionary things that's ever happened to images themselves is that computers are starting to learn how to see and how to recognize objects and how to make sense of them. With things like machine learning and artificial intelligence and computer vision, there you can set up a camera that will look at a room and it will tell you exactly what's in that room. This is very remarkable, the idea that you don't have to have a human subject looking at something anymore. We're looking at things like facial recognition, looking at cameras that can read license plates, artificial intelligence systems that recognize objects and photos and can look at social media profiles and make sense of the images. We communicate with each other around the world through the landscape, and at the same time, the landscape is more and more looking at us. I've kind of come to the conclusion that they're literally the same thing. Like a planet that's set up to do global telecommunications is also, by definition, a system that is set up to do global mass surveillance. That relationship of seeing and power and sensing and storing information, who gets to know what about whom and what are they able to do with it? I think these are very urgent questions. Just try to understand some of these systems, understand how they're changing the societies that we live in.